You are recording one.
All right. Okay, that'd be great. Oh, awesome.
Well,
Just stay up. That's better. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and start now, okay? And like I said before we started, I apologize that my back will be to you all a lot. But that's just part of it and stuff. But you'll still be able to follow along. Everybody, do me a favor and say hi from Mullins Elementary today.
hi.
We're really happy that you sponsored us here. Is it middle school? Okay, this is I apologize, middle school. I apologize, but thank you all so much. 6th grade, right here participating from the Mullins School. So thank you all so much for having us today. This is week number 2 of the art workshop. Did you all get a chance to watch the first video yet? Okay, so you're familiar with what we're doing, and I heard that you all are getting started with your stories, right? Writing your stories, and you're just in time today because that's actually what we're going to be focusing on today. A lot is going to be about writing, and like I said in the first video, most of you probably already watched that now, hopefully you have. This is in correlation or connection with Project Prevent, so that means that the stories that you're going to be writing about in this workshop have to be connected to or addressed somewhere in some way with issues facing students today. Now, something that I thought about as soon as I finished the last workshop video that I didn't address, that I do want to focus on a little bit before we start, is this is a large range of grades participating, okay? We have, I think, 4th to 12th grade. So when we start talking about the concepts of writing and how do you approach a story, how do you write a story, you can imagine that it's going to be much different per grade level. And so therefore, what we're talking about is going to have to apply to a lot of different grades. So some stuff that I talk about, you may think, what in the world is he talking about? That's just over. That's just we get to that 2 years from now. Well, don't worry, your teachers will help you through that process to understand when I say maybe rise of action. Okay, what that means. But the basic boundaries that we're working in, though, is that you have to create a story talking about problems facing students. Now, I addressed this last week too. You can do this in very creative ways. Okay, for instance, you may not outright talk about bullying. Okay, but your story could have elements of bullying in it. A character that either is bullied or perhaps maybe even is someone who is a bully, and then they realize the error of their ways towards the end of the book, and that's where a resolution happens and things of that nature. So try to package your story around issues facing students, because at the end of this workshop we are going to be publishing 35 students' works, okay? But if you want to be one of those students who has a published book at the end of this workshop, you got to meet the criteria, right? You got to do what we say kind of when it comes to writing about stuff facing students. If you were to do a story about a magical leprechaun who lost his pot of gold and he has to go on a journey to find it, I'd like to read that book, but it's not going to meet our standards for the workshop. Does that make sense? Okay, so write about something dealing with problems facing students, and you should have a good chance to qualify to be published. Okay, so let's go ahead now and we'll get started. I like to do an overview each week, so to keep everybody on track. Remember that the holler.org is where we place all of our videos, all of our content for the art workshop. Everything is found on the holler.org. We asked everybody to go onto the holler.org last week and to register, create a login and a password. And then we also asked for you to look for what's called the Art Workshop Holler on the website. It's really easy to find. Once you log in, at the top of the screen, one of the drop-down menus says Hollers. You click on that, and I think we're on the first page of the list of all the different categories of hollers on the website. You click on that, and once you join, you have to join the holler. So you go into it and you click join, and then once you do that, say hello on the forum. All you got to do is say hi, or just let us know that you're in there. I can see you when you log in. I can actually see when people apply to be into the holler, or when they join the holler. I mean, I can see when that happens, but also say hello. That way you're familiar with how it works when you're submitting stuff and content on the holler. Okay? There's videos. If you go under documents on the holler.org, under the art workshop holler, there's a tab at the top that says documents. If you click on that, you can see all of the past videos. So if you want to get a head start on maybe what creating your drawings or basic drawing tutorials, those videos are listed on there for you from previous workshops. So you can actually get ahead in the workshop by doing that, okay? Now there will be differences, of course, in this workshop and the past workshops, but when it comes to basic drawing skills, that can never hurt to go ahead and jump in there and check those out, okay? Now, if you have the actual list of what we're doing, today's Words with Pictures Part 1, and what we're talking about today is, of course, creating characters, the setting, plot, rise of action or rising action, talking about building the story, and then the fun part of this is the storyboard creation, which we're going to get at towards the latter part of today's workshop, okay? So that's pretty much the outline for today's workshop. Now, when it comes to actually talking about your story, everyone at this point should have an idea about what they're going to write about, at least, okay? And you should be able to. One thing that if you can tell if you have a good story, usually, if you can sum up what the story's about in a few sentences. And we can use a popular book or popular storyline, Harry Potter, for example, and we'll address the first book. And basically the story is a young boy learns he has special abilities, and he learns a lot about his past, and he is taken off to a magical school where he grows in his abilities, okay? Now that's pretty much the gist of the first book, right? So your story, you should be able to talk about it in a few sentences. You should tell someone and explain to someone what your story is about using a few sentences. If you can do that, okay, that usually tells you whether or not you have a pretty good idea for a story. Because in those first few sentences that you use to describe your story, you're talking about the character, usually the main character. You're talking about usually the setting maybe sometimes, but you're also talking about the conflict. And maybe even you're talking if there's some sort of resolution that has to happen, then you're also talking about that too, okay? So try to talk about your story in a few sentences. Just explain what your story's about. Try to work on that before the end of the day, even if you haven't already, okay? Because what we're going to do, if you get accepted as one of those 35 students that goes on to participate as a published author, an illustrator, you're going to be asked to actually describe your story in a few sentences. And if you look on any back of any book in this library, typically you're going to find a description of what that book's about. Okay? And it's not a really long description. Usually it's only a few sentences, and it talks about what the book is about. So you're going to have to create one of those for your own book. Okay, to go on the back of your book once it's published, that's going to tell people when they go and they pick up a copy of their book and they flip it over and they look on the back of it, we want to be able to read in a few sentences what your story is about. Okay? Let's talk a little bit too today about character design. Now, I asked everybody to start writing their story last week. I asked you to start creating the characters. Whenever I design a character for one of my own stories, or even when I'm working as an illustrator for another story, I'll get a list of things that describe the character, okay? So I may get a few adjectives that work. And we'll say that it's tall, we'll say mostly, let's say angry, okay? And let's say hair is into the eyes, okay? Now this is a very basic description. There's only 3 things that we know about this character. It's very general. Okay, we could experiment and create all sorts of different characters just using these small descriptions right here. So what I'll do is I'll start thinking about that character. I'll start thinking about what does that character look like. Now this gets into basic drawing a little bit, but this also helps. If you're interested, when you start to practice a little bit about what your characters look like, believe it or not, use a pencil, right? I said believe it or not. Of course we use pencils. You don't want to start out with pen. Use a pencil, and you're going to start to draw the character out. Now we use this method called the circle method, and what I do is I press very lightly. Now I'm using this purplish pink highlighter for this to show you this a little bit here. But I'll draw these circles, ovals, and shapes that's going to help me to understand where the certain parts of my character is going to be. And we'll go into more depth about this later on. I don't want you to get too overwhelmed, but you can see that these are circles and shapes making up the outline of what we can see as a person. We can tell this is a head. We can see that this is a neck, shoulders. Here's the arms, elbows. This is the waist, and so on. Okay, so this is a basic outline of a person. Now, also with this, you can almost see that this is like a stick figure, but just a little more detailed. Instead of, we have a circle for the head, but instead of just a line for the body, we're filling this out with shapes, with circles, ovals, things like that. Once I have this general shape, and I'm pressing very lightly, when you see me use this pink highlighter, that means I'm barely pressing down on my page, okay? Once I have an idea about the general outline of a character, I'm looking back on my description. Now, you write your own description of your characters, right? So you know what your character looks like before you even start creating it and drawing it, but I have this general idea. So then I may go in and start to draw it. Now, I have the hair and the eyes, so I may put the ears here on the sides of the head. The hair is going to come down. It's going to go into the eyes, like I said, okay? Coming down off the top of the head like this, right? So this will be the hair. The face will come down to a point with the chin. I'm following my circles, okay? I'm just following these shapes that I created. I may put a jacket on this character, okay? So we have, this character may be wearing a jacket, all right? The shoulders, of course, comes down to the arms here. Now you can see I'm drawing over top of this in black. And what this represents, the black represents me pressing down harder with my pencil now, okay? I'm starting to press down harder with my pencil. And so that I have more of an outline of what the character looks like, right? Once I have that then, I may press very lightly again to try to get the details of the face. I like to put a line coming down the center of the face so I know where the center point of the face is, okay? And that's important because it tells you where the nose will be. The nose will be usually down on the face a little bit. Your character may be different. This is just my own creation here. And then the eyes will come over to the sides here. So I have 3 dashes. The first dash represents where the eyes will be on each side, the nose and the mouth, okay? And then I can start to go ahead then and create the character from there. I may put the eyebrows up here because the hair goes down into the eyes like we talked about earlier. Let's give him some pupils here, all right? So when you start creating this character, you press down lightly, and you want to draw your character a few times so you know what the character looks like. Draw it from different angles. You may draw it from the side, because you're going to want to draw your character in different angles, because when you look at a book, you don't just draw a profile. A profile means you're looking straight on at a character. You don't see just a profile drawing on every page of a character. You see them from different angles, and we'll talk about that later on in developing your page. But you see them from different angles, so know what your character looks like, okay? That's something you could go ahead right now and get started on, working on today, is drawing your characters out. That's probably the fun part of it. But if you like writing, writing's the fun part too. So it's up to you on what you're going to have probably the most fun with. But I love to write. I love to create stories, and hopefully you'll have fun on this project too. So here we have a basic character. We have the eyes. You see all this pink going on, right? There's a lot of pink highlighter. You can go back and then erase that part after you ink your character. But sketch your characters out, get an idea. Do this for every single one of your characters. Thank you. Do this for every single character, okay? I'm going to go ahead and use I found a napkin in my pocket, so I'll use that right now. Let's go ahead and take care of it. Yeah, so you started writing your story. Don't worry so much about a title right now. If you want to go ahead and title your story, that's fine. But let's say number one, okay, I have a character. Thank you so much. Named Lacey. Number two, I have a character named Jeff. Okay. Number three, I have a character named Tanya. Okay. Number four, I have a character named Kelly. Okay. All right. So I have 4 characters in my story that I know appear in my story. Let's say Lacey is my main character. Okay. She's a character that we find throughout the entire book. Let's say Jeff and Tanya are supporting characters. That means that they appear in certain parts of the book. They support the main character in the main character's adventure, in their journey from the beginning to the end of the book. And then let's say Kelly is also a supporting character, but she only appears in certain parts of the book, okay? Let's say she's a teacher, Lacey's a student, Jeff and Tanya are both students, but the main character in my book is Lacey. Now, what I'll need to do, if I know that a character is going to appear on one of my pages, whether it's a graphic novel, picture book, or chapter book, if I know I'm going to draw that character at some point, you need to go ahead and start drawing each one of these characters out right now, okay? Know what they look like, all right? Design them. Know what they look like. Have ideas about how they dress, how tall are they, how thin, how everything from their hair to their eyes. Know everything about your character, because what you're doing is you're creating a character from nothing that's going to enter into a world you're creating. And listen, whether you're a fan of Star Wars or you're a fan of give me another popular book right now that you're into. What's Miss Peregrine's School for Peculiar Children? Has anyone read that book? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, I think I pronounced it right, but it's probably wrong. No matter what it is, though, that you're interested in, every single idea starts out like this, a blank page, okay? There's no magic that's involved in creating stories. There's not. Believe it or not, there's certain elements that you can actually incorporate, like ingredients. When you go to bake cookies, you have to have a list of ingredients, right? And usually what we want to work with are things like this. Number one, setting. Where does your story take place? Is it on the moon? Is it on the bottom of the ocean? Is it 1,000 years from now? Or 200 years in the past? Is it in the country? Is it in the city? Okay? Things like this matter. If it is in the city, is it downtown where all the hustle and bustle is going on? Where your character's surrounded by apartment buildings and banks and stores? Or is it in the boroughs, out into the slums, into the part where people are stricken by poverty and someone has to rise up from their environment to go on to better themselves in their region, in their area. See, these are things you have to think of. Okay? The second part is going to be your characters. Okay? Who's going to be in your story? How many characters will be in your story? From characters, you start thinking about a main character or main characters, right? Sometimes we have a set of characters that go through a journey together. All right? They're all just as equally important as the other. Think about the Hobbit. Okay? Frodo's pretty important, but the rest of the characters, those supporting characters that go on through the story with them, are just as important. Okay? Supporting characters, main characters, these things matter. Okay? Think about your plot. All right? The plot carries the story along. Okay? The plot carries the story along. All right, let's think of Star Wars for a second. It's a popular movie. It's not in book form, but we can think of Star Wars, and Star Wars is a great way to look at plot. In the story, we're dealing with Star Wars. We have what's known as the Force. The Force binds everything together in the universe, but there's two sides of the Force. There's the good side and the bad side, the light and the dark, right? And those two sides are constant conflict with one another. The dark side wants to overpower the light, and the light wants to suppress the dark. And that's happening throughout the plot in the entire series, from the beginning of the first movie all the way up to these new releases that are coming out today. It's a constant battle with one another. So the plot is the light and dark force, right? Fighting. And the characters have to work around that plot all the time. They're impacted by that plot. Another way to look at it is, how is my story going to carry on? What are the problems that's going to happen? And that brings us to conflict. These are your ingredients. Conflict. Something has to happen in your story, and especially where we're talking about Project Prevent, where we're talking about issues facing students today. Something has to happen in your story that the characters, your main characters, have to overcome. Okay? There has to be an obstacle. There can be small obstacles along the way to a larger problem, right? But you have to be able to show that your characters are overcoming an obstacle, right? And then the basic last ingredient we're going to use is resolution. Resolution. What is resolution? Resolution is, how do they solve the problems, right? What happens at the end? How does this all come together to form a story? Okay? These are things you have to think about with your story. These are parts of a story that make a story a good story, right? Okay. So we have the ingredients. We know that we're going to be working on our characters now. And let's talk about each choice that you have specifically, from picture book to chapter book to graphic novel. Storyboards, if you've ever watched a Pixar movie on DVD, sometimes there's extras, what they call extra bonus features, right? And with the bonus features, what you'll sometimes find is the artists and creators of the story will talk about how they created the film, right? And in a large part of the time when they're showing these, they use storyboards, okay? So when I'm working with an author or a publisher to illustrate a book, this is how the process works. I'm going to pull out a script. This is what I received from a publisher. And what it is, it's words on a page. There's nothing special about it. There's words on a page. That's all it is. And these words are the story, and I have to read what's on this page and then decide how am I going to turn these words into a picture book. Okay? That's my job as an illustrator. Sometimes you have direction from a publisher. Sometimes a publisher will say, we want our characters to appear in this certain way. We want X amount of pages. We prefer watercolor over paint. Those types of direction. But typically, and this is probably 90% of the time, you have very minimal direction. Okay? So what my job is then to read this story, okay, and turn that into a picture book or a chapter book or a graphic novel. How that works is like this. I begin to read my story, and I'll block it off into what I think should appear on each page. And we'll use a picture book as our example. I'll read the first portion, and I'll get down to a certain point, and I'll make a mark on it, and I'll say, all of this part is going to appear on the first page. All of this will appear on the second page. All of this will appear on the third page, and so on and so forth. When you're creating your story, okay, you're at an advantage than what, let's say, I am as an illustrator working for someone else. Because you are creating your story, right? So while you're writing your story, you can start thinking about these things. Let's say you're going to use a picture book, for example, okay? Start thinking about what is going to appear on this page, okay? Let's pretend this is a page of your book right here. What is going to appear on that page? And you can also get really, really fancy with this stuff, because you know how a book opens out into 2 pages? You can take a book, pull it off the shelf, or pull it off your shelf at home. You open it up, and you have a left side and a right side, usually, right? Unless you're looking at the back cover or the front cover. You have a left side and a right side. So the pages connect like this, don't they? So you have 2 pages. See that? This part down the middle right here is the spine. So while you're designing your book, you can start thinking about stuff like, maybe I want to do an illustration of a countryside. And I have a road coming down like this. Maybe this is the first few pages of my book. and the road comes down like this, and then there's a hill coming up. And you can actually draw on two sides of your book, creating this vast landscape that your characters are going to be introduced to the reader in. This is the opening of the book. Here's a farmhouse up here with windows. Okay, and you can see how this sort of works. There's a porch here. There's the roof. There's mountains behind it. Okay, and the road's coming up this way. I asked you to look at different books that you're interested in last week and start to get an idea about what you like and what you don't like. So if you're going to do a picture book, I asked you to look at various picture books, remember? The reason I wanted you to do that is I wanted you to see how the illustrator places the different elements of their story on a page. So you can see how this works here, right? There's a house up there, and then there's a road coming up. There's mountains in the background. And this could be there's two different pages of my book, but those two pages can make up one illustration, right? One, what we call in the industry a spread, a two-page spread, okay? You can create that in your book. Don't just think about one page to page and this illustration for this page, this illustration for that page. Be creative on how you place your artwork in your book, okay? Now let's talk about chapter books for a second. Chapter books, you're at an advantage, but you have to have a lot more words. You place illustrations throughout the book at different locations. How do you choose where to place an illustration? Now, typically, for a chapter book, you may want to place an illustration at the beginning of a chapter, obviously, right? So let's say this is one page of my chapter book, right? So I may put chapter 3 here, okay? And then I may have the illustration here. I may have an illustration here, all right? And let's say it's introducing this particular chapter, right? So we have a character that we're drawing here, and this character is holding a child, okay? And this is an illustration to introduce this chapter of our chapter book. But then we have other pages following that. How do you decide where to place an illustration in a chapter book? You remember those ingredients we talked about earlier? Anytime that you introduce a character, anytime that you have, let's say, conflict to arise, where there's a problem, anytime you move them from one setting to another or establish the first setting, all of these important ingredients, okay, are good opportunities in a chapter book to show what it looks like visually to the reader, especially the resolutions. At the end, when the hero overcomes the protagonist, which is a big fancy word for villain, okay, and the hero overcomes the villain, or if they don't, hopefully they do, though, in our workshop, right? We want the heroes to win. But when that happens, that's a great opportunity to show that in a drawing, okay? Now we're going to talk about graphic novels, too. Graphic novels are becoming more and more popular with students. They are very, just a great method of sharing stories and language arts through a visual format. The graphic novels are very popular. Typically, a graphic novel will look like a standard comic book page, okay? Usually, it's what we call portrait. Do you remember we talked about that last time? It's more tall than it is wide, the pages. And let's say we're going to go ahead and draw another page onto here. On these pages, if you're creating a graphic novel, you have to have panels, right? And the panels are the boxes that are, what we said last time, that our action or our story takes place in, okay? You have to start thinking about how to position all of these panels and everything together. And you can start planning from the very beginning of writing your story. You can say, page 1, this is what's happening on page 1. Page 2, this is what's happening on page 2. So you know exactly what you have to put on those pages. But we started talking about all of this layout principles with storyboards. And I had to go ahead and talk about the different formats for a second, because your storyboard, how you create your storyboard, really depends on what you're creating. But this is what I want everybody to do as you're writing your story, okay? I want you to, first, you're going to draw boxes, all kinds of boxes on a piece of paper. Everybody work on this for your story, okay? I'm going to draw these boxes, and what these boxes are going to represent are pages from my book. And I'm using a picture book as my example right now, because that's the fastest and easiest way. You can do this for a graphic novel. So here's a series of pages, okay? This is page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6. Okay? There's got to be more pages in this book. In each one of these boxes, we need to draw with stick figures, okay, what's going to be happening on each page. That's a storyboard. You have to determine what's happening on each page by your story. See how this all connects? So on page 1, you should know exactly what's going to be taking place. On page 2, you should know what's going to be taking place. And you start to sketch that out with stick figures. Okay, for the purpose of this, we'll say that, let's say a student is getting out of school. Okay, so I'm going to draw this stick figure with their backpack and a door behind them that's open. Okay, that'll be the school and some steps. All right, this is a basic outline of what's going to be appearing on my first page. Okay, it's a stick figure, and I need to know what's going to be happening on each page. So that's a storyboard. A storyboard is like the blueprint for your work, right? You will create your own storyboard, and you'll use your story to create it, so that before you ever start to draw on a piece of paper, you want to know exactly what's going to appear on that page before you start. Okay? I hope everybody's clear on that. It's real important. Plan your book and know exactly what's going to appear on each page before you start. Okay? Everyone should be working on this right now in preparation for next week. Next week you should have already started your storyboard. You should have most of your storyboard actually drawn out, since your story should be completed and done by next week, because we're starting to draw our pages. I want you to be thinking about how to position illustrations in interesting ways. I want you to think about also, and this is really important too, you're going to be thinking about where will your words appear on that page, okay? Because you may have artwork created for an illustration, but you may not know exactly where your words are going to appear. So all of these things come together to create a book, okay? No one just sits down and draws a picture on a piece of paper and tells a story as they go along. I'm going to know where my words will appear. So let's say my words are going to appear down here. This is for storyboards. I'm going to know where my characters are going to be on this page. Okay? I'm going to know what they're going to be doing. I'm going to know the setting for every page. All right? And this is really important. The students that were successful last workshop, they had wonderful storyboards for their works. Okay? And these storyboards do not have to be anything really detailed or special, but you need to draw out your work and know what's going to appear, no matter if you're working on a graphic novel, a picture book, or a chapter book. Okay? Know what's going to appear on every page of your book. Planning is important. If you want to be published in this workshop, plan. Now, let's talk a little bit about next week. We're going to continue building our story, and we're going to do an emphasis on setting. Setting is really important. How do you show setting through your illustrations, okay? We're going to continue creating our characters. We're going to, not creating our characters, you should have already written your story, but I'm talking about designing your characters, know what they look like, and things of that nature. We're going to be talking about drawing landscapes, structures, a thing called perspective in art, which is basically what angle you're looking at something from, okay? And I want you to go onto the holler, and I'd like for everyone participating in the workshop, now this doesn't impact whether or not you'll be published, but, you know, if I see a student on there who's sharing things, and I see their name, and their name appears a lot in the holler, sharing this and that, later on down the road, when you all submit your books to me, and I see that student's name, I'm going to say, hey, this student participated throughout. Let's check out what they have here. And, it's important to be known in a project. Stand out in a project. So go on to theholler.org, and I want you to list for me what books, now listen real carefully, what books are you looking at for inspiration for this project? Have you found certain books that you really enjoy, a certain illustrator or certain author that's created something that you really would like to create something similar towards? Share that. Who is that author? Who is that illustrator? What's the name of that book? Okay? I want everybody to try to do that before next Monday. Okay? So I hope that everyone's enjoyed this segment of the workshop. We're talking about planning now. That's the biggest emphasis I can place on this is planning. Know what you're going to create on each page before you create it. Okay? Any questions from any of the participants online? You can type that in the message box if you have anything. Any questions here, Mullins? No? No question? Everybody got a story idea in mind?
Yeah.
We're going to start working on creating our characters, right? And creating a storyboard for that story, right? Okay. It's really important. I know we had some amazing submissions that came in last year, and I hope to see many of you published here at Mullins, okay? And we'll work hard to make sure everyone's successful. I'd like to see it so that every single submission, it makes it so hard to judge them, it's going to be, we may have to just publish everybody, who knows. But anyway, thank you all so much for participating. Remember, going to theholler.org and let's see some of your favorite books that you're looking at. Also, let's thank KVEC for making this project possible through the grant for Project Prevent 2 and the connection with Project Prevent. We really appreciate the opportunity, don't we, everybody?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for participating, and we'll see you next Monday.
Can we see you all over at Betsy Lane really fast to sign off? Say hi.
Betsy Lane, can you wave?
Can y'all hear us? They were having a little trouble hearing, I heard earlier. We turned the mic up.
Okay.
They might pop up here.
We can hear you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
We were mute. I have a suggestion.
You are.
Wear a cordless mic. Hook the other part to the Mondo board because we have ours as loud as it will go, and you're still real low.
Okay, thank you. We'll try that out next time.
Yeah, we can do that.
That's a good idea.
Thank you.
You'll see me run too far away, though, and I'll be pulled back towards the TV.
It would have been wireless mic.
It'll be wireless.
Do y'all have any questions for Chris?
Any questions? Is everybody tracking okay? Yeah?
What do you mean by tracking?
That's a military term. Everybody following. We're
Following
following?
all right?
Okay. I know.
Yeah, I think so. We have some news today, so we're.
Listen, it's just about building the story from the ground up. Any illustrator, author who creates, they know exactly what's going to appear on a page before they ever start drawing. So if you plan very well for your book, then you're going to be successful. And here's the thing too. I spoke with the humanities chair for the Kentucky Humanities Council chair, and they're over the Kentucky Book Fair, okay, this year and next year. And there are opportunities that's come up now for the students that will be published. The 6 will go on to participate in the entrepreneurial project that we have for this workshop. We have some amazing opportunities that I'm going to talk about a little bit further down the road. But you're going to have so many more opportunities with this workshop than in previous workshops to get your work out there, receive awards, and hopefully build a foundation for money for school and college one day, okay? So that's the project. The governor has the entrepreneurial challenge. That's one aspect to it, but the Kentucky Book Fair though is really good. Okay. And next time we meet, we're going to let Bobby Sullivan talk about his book, Burrow the Squirrel, that fits directly into this workshop because it deals with self-image and overcoming obstacles dealing with people's perceptions about you, okay? So I look forward to having Bobby talk next time about that. So you better prepare something, Bobby. All right, thank you, Mr. Shepherd, thank you. Betsy Lane, thank you, Mullins.
You're welcome. Hi, Mullins. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We did it. I should have paid it.